Hello.
Hey, just a minute.
Okay.
Sir,
Shall I
sir,
start,
can I?
sir?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Sir, my patient, Mr. SG, age 33 years, male. He's a resident of West Bengal and is a graduation dropout. Informant is patient himself and his parents. Patient is a recipient of third renal transplant and he has come for regular follow-up. So I would date back the history to 5 years of age, sir. At the age of 5 years, the patient and his parents noticed that the patient was having swelling of face and lower limbs, which was insidious in onset and progressive in nature. It would increase as the day progressed, and it was relieved by sleeping. The swelling of lower limbs and face was not associated with any hematuria, fever, joint pain, rashes, abdominal pain, any decreased urine output, any history of breathlessness or dyspnea and exertion. Because of these symptoms, the patient consulted their local doctor, and the patient was told that there was some protein leaking in his urine, and he was referred to our higher center for further evaluation. The patient was further evaluated at CMC Vellore. The patient does not remember the BP or his creatinine levels during this time. On evaluation at CMC Vellore, the patient was advised an renal biopsy, and the biopsy was uneventful, and the patient was told to have FSGS. And the patient was managed conservatively with oral medications, which were advised to be taken daily. The patient does not remember being given any IV medications, and patient does not remember being advised regarding any genetic test during this time. The patient with daily intake of these medications improved symptomatically and was on regular follow-up every 2 to 3 months at CMC Vellore. The patient took the medications for around 6 months and was the medications were the doses were gradually tapered and later stopped after 6 months. And the patient was advised for follow-up with a local doctor for his BP. The patient does not remember being told any urinary dipstick monitoring at home. There are no further such episodes, and the patient was continued with his schooling and playing with his peers. He had a good appetite and was active with his activities. But his parents noticed that the patient's height and weight was lesser than compared to his peers, but they never consulted for this same. The patient was vaccinated as per the schedule. So until the age of 10 years, the patient was doing well, sir. At the age of 10 years, the patient started to develop generalized weakness, fatigue, and loss of appetite, and gradual onset, which was gradual in onset and progressive in nature.
Any renal function test during that time? Anything he is aware of?
For this, the patient attenders again went back to CMC Vellore, and there he was told that the patient is having kidney failure, and they do not exactly remember the creatinine value during this time, and the patient was advised for initiation of hemodialysis. The patient attenders do not remember being told for a repeat biopsy during this time. So the patient was initiated on hemodialysis via right IJV, right-sided neck catheter, and the patient still continued to have urine output during this time. So during this same admission, the patient underwent an left-sided forearm fistula construction, and the patient was asked to continue on hemodialysis for thrice weekly hemodialysis daily, thrice weekly hemodialysis, and the patient was also put on erythropoietin and iron injections during this time. During the same period, the patient was advised for peritoneal dialysis and transplantation. The patient did not opt for peritoneal dialysis because of the logistic issues in his native place, and the patient opted for renal transplantation. So the patient was simultaneous. The patient parents were evaluated as a donor. So the father was turned to be diabetic and hypertensive, and the mother's blood group was B positive, and the patient's blood group was O positive. Hence, his maternal aunt, aged 48 years, was worked up for the renal transplantation. And at age of 11 years, the patient underwent an unrelated renal transplantation at CMC Vellore. The patient parents do not remember being about any induction agent being given during that time. The patient had an immediately good urine outputs immediately and was shifted to ward in 2 days. And the patient was discharged within 1 week with an baseline creatinine of around nadir creatinine of 0.9 milligram per deciliter, and the patient was having an urine output around 5 liters during the time of discharge. The patient parents remember the discharge medications to be cyclosporin, azathioprine, and Vizolone. And the patient was advised a regular follow-up weekly for weekly for 1 month, and later the patient continued follow-up at CMC Vellore every 6 months. So with this, the patient was apparently all right, and there was no any symptoms of edema, infection, any biopsy advice during the follow-up, or any new symptoms during this symptoms. The medications were gradually reduced, and patient was continuing his medications.
Any proteinuria?
No, sir. No proteinuria
Proteinuria,
until this time.
edema? No.
No, sir. No edema, no infection, no any biopsy was advised, or no any new symptoms during this period, sir.
Okay.
So it's apparently all right until the age of 19 years. So at the age of 19, patient started to notice swelling of lower limbs and face. And again, the patient again went for consultation at CMC Vellore, and the patient was told that the patient was having protein leaking in the urine, and there was rise in his creatine also. And rise in creatine, and the patient underwent a renal biopsy at CMC Vellore. And during this period, the patient did not have any reddish urine. There was no history of any non-compliance with medications, no history of any fever, no history of any reduced urine output during this time. So the biopsy was uneventful, and the patient was told that the kidney was gradually failing, and the patient need to be compliant with his medications, and they do not remember being told any new medications was being added, and his same medications were continued during this time. And he was advised regular follow-up, and his was advised frequent BP monitoring during this time. So patient was discharged, and patient continued his follow-up. On monthly, the patient was on monthly follow-up for around 3 to 4 months during this time, and later he was advised 6 monthly follow-up, which was and during this 6 monthly follow-up, he was told that the creatinine was gradually rising, and on each follow-up, and he was told that he might require initiation of hemodialysis in another 1 to 2 years. So the patient output continued the same medications. The patient output gradually started to reduce, and he's started to require additional BP medications during his follow-up. So 2 years after this biopsy procedure, at the age of 21 years, the patient had symptoms suggestive of nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, and generalized fatigue, for which he was advised reinitiation of hemodialysis. So he was initiated back on hemodialysis with left forearm fistula, which was constructed previously at Kolkata. So the patient continued dialysis for 6 months, thrice weekly, and patient did not have any major events during his dialysis period. Simultaneously, still the patient was maintaining an urine output around 500 ml during this period, and he continued with this dialysis schedule. Simultaneously, the patient was again given an option of renal transplantation, as there were no suitable donors in his family. The patient was given an option of live unrelated transplantation. The details of which donor details are not known to the patient attendants. So he underwent a live unrelated renal transplantation at the age of 22 years in Kolkata. The details of which the donor details are not known. They do not even remember the pre-transplant workup and cross-match reports of this patient.
Any special
the patient,
investigation was done during that time?
Yes,
like
sir. The patient,
investigation?
Yes, sir. Patient attendants tell that the donor details were not completely given to them, and the donor workup was done completely separately, sir. And they remember cross-matching tests were done, sir, but they do not remember the reports.
Okay. Any special cross-matching test which was done, which was told to them? No. No idea.
Patient party do not remember that.
Okay. Okay. Fine.
Okay. So the patient received two costly injections prior to the transplantation, and on 2 consecutive days, and the patient was posted for renal transplantation. They do not remember being given any plex during this time.
So 2 consecutive days is basically an ATG possibly. Otherwise, yes, on a 014, you can conclude that it may be an IL-2 blocker. You can say clearly that it is possibly an ATG induction.
Yes, possible ATG is given to the patient. So intraoperatively, the patient was told that the patient was having a severe rejection and on-table nephrectomy was done for the patient, and patient was shifted to ICU on the same day. So in ICU, the patient vitals were stable, and there was no any urine output during this period, and the patient was initiated on hemodialysis the same day, and the patient was told that he needs to continue his thrice weekly hemodialysis schedule, and the patient was discharged after 1 week and was continued on tab Visolon 5 mg daily during the discharge period. So the patient continued on thrice weekly maintenance hemodialysis without much clinically issues until the age of 28 years. Sir. At the age of 28 years, patient started to have a history of fever, pain abdomen. The fever was continuous type, high grade, associated with chills and rigors. There was no history of any burning, micturition during this time. The fever was not related to his dialysis timing or schedule. And on evaluation, the patient was told to have an infection of his first allograft kidney, and he was admitted and treated with IV antibiotics for around 2 weeks. Even after 2 weeks of antibiotics, the patient's fever did not subside, and so the patient underwent an right-sided graft nephrectomy. The procedure was uneventful, and the fever subsided after the graft nephrectomy.
Whether the steroids taken out during this time?
Yes, sir. After the graft nephrectomy, the steroids were stopped for the patient, sir.
No. Prior to this, because
no,
the first hyperacute rejection, the graft was taken out.
The patient, no, sir. The patient was continued on tab Visolon during his discharge, and he was continued taking the tab Visolon for the period, sir.
Because there was no burning micturition, so yes, it may be a graft syndrome also. The graft pain, fever, yes, it may be a graft syndrome. That's the reason I'm asking.
Yes. And the patient attendants not remember exactly the imaging reports of that graft, sir. And the fever subsided after the graft nephrectomy, and the patient was discharged after week.
The fever also will subside in a hyperacute or is in the graft syndrome. Graft syndrome is also, if you do a nephrectomy, then the graft is not there, no immunological related disease, and then the fever subsides. So hyperacute rejection, hyperacute or a graft syndrome, it behaves similarly. Only thing is, if your steroid has been reduced, then also you can get it sometimes. You may require an increase in the dose of immunosuppression if there is any graft syndrome. The treatment for pyelonephritis is entirely different. So you need to do a antibiotic and nephrectomy if there is no, because it's difficult to treat a failing graft or a non-functioning graft with an antibiotic, because the antibiotic won't reach in a sufficient concentration.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And the patient was discharged after 1 week, and he continued on thrice weekly maintenance hemodialysis. During this period, his father was transferred to Bangalore, so he continued his further follow-up with at our center. So he was registered for cadaveric renal transplantation in 2012. So from 2012 till recent 2018, the patient has received a call for cadaveric renal transplantation thrice, and he has been rejected because there was cross-match positivity in him with a donor. So because of this repeated patient being rejected for the transplantation, the patient was planned for a single antigen bead panel assay, and he was told that the patient possibility of getting a completely negative cross-match donor was very low for him, and he would be considered for renal transplantation if in the future there would be a donor with low titers. And he was told regarding the risk associated with transplanting in a patient who is having cross-match positivity, and the patient and his party agreed to this. At the age of 33 years, on April 2019, he received a call for on the fourth time for a cadaveric renal transplantation, and after testing, the patient was told that he was having cross-match positivity, but his titers were told to be less than 5,000. So it was advised. He was told that he could undergo for renal transplantation, but he was advised regarding the risk of hyperacute rejection and decreased graft survival, and the patient party agreed to this, and patient underwent renal transplantation. ATG injection was given to the patient, and after the ATG was given, injection was given to the patient, and the donor was a 32-year-old male who had met with a road traffic accident. The kidney was harvested in an outside hospital in Bangalore itself, and the patient underwent renal transplantation at our center. So immediately after the anastomosis, there was no urine output in the for the patient, But the graft was healthy, and the patient was surgery was completed, and the patient was shifted to ICU. In view of no urine output and no urine output, the patient was initiated on hemodialysis the same day. There was no history of intraoperative hypotension, blood transfusion to the patient during this period, or excessive blood loss during the surgery. So after the initiation of the patient was completed on hemodialysis. On the day 3 of uh, post-operative day 3, the patient continued to have no urine output, and the patient was planned for an renal biopsy. And the patient was also given second and third dose of ATG on post-operative day 1 and 2. So the biopsy procedure was uneventful, and the patient was told that he was having a rejection. The patient does not exactly remember the type of rejection, and the patient was initiated on plasmapheresis on day 4. And the patient was given a dose of rituximab on day 5. After the first session of PLEX, the patient was shifted back to ward, and the patient was continued on alternate day plasmapheresis, and the patient received 4 sessions of plasmapheresis. After the 4th session of plasmapheresis, the patient started to open up, and the patient had an urine output of 100 ml on the post-operative day 9. So the urine output gradually started to improve, and the creatinine started to reduce, and thus the dialysis was withheld in this patient. On post-operative day 14, a rebiopsy was done, and he was told that his graft function was improving, and he need to continue the same medications, and his plasmapheresis was stopped after this. By post-operative day 20, he had a urine output of around 5 liters, and he had an nadir creatinine of around 0.9 milligram per deciliter. The drain was removed on post-operative day 21, and Foley's catheter was removed on post-operative day 22. He was discharged the next day with the following medications: tacrolimus 2 mg BD, mycophenolate mofetil 500 mg BD, tab Boisilon 20 mg OD, tab Septran, and tab valganciclovir 450 mg OD. So the patient continued with his regular follow-up. So this is the second month of his post-operative, and he's healthy. He does not have any fresh complaints, and he's having a urine output around 4 to 5 liters, and has come for his regular follow-ups. So this is present history.
Okay.
Coming to the past history, there is no history of diabetes mellitus. New onset.
Everything started since the age of 5 years. So you want to say,
yes, sir.
Prior to 5 years, he had any diabetes? I think you should have mentioned it. So there is nothing in the past. He's a healthy child. Initially, it was born, and till 5 years, he was okay. Then from birth to 5 years, if there's anything a major problem, then you can tell. Otherwise, don't include the diabetes in everything.
No history, sir.
Right.
Yeah. Coming to the family history, he's an second product of non-consanguineous marriage. His elder brother is healthy. He is born out of LSES, as the mother had pregnancy-induced hypertension, and due to fetal distress, and the patient was baby was kept in NICU for almost 14 days after birth. So there was no any. Yes, sir.
Birth weight?
Sir, birth weight is 2.5 kg, sir.
Okay.
And he was kept in NICU for almost 14 days. No other family members have any significant kidney disease. Only the father has history of diabetes and hypertension. Coming to the personal history, a patient consumes a mixed diet, and his appetite is adequate.
Anything significant in this?
No, sir.
Anything significant? So what is your diagnosis?
Coming to the diagnosis, here is an high risk HLA incompatible, ABO compatible, cadaveric renal transplant recipient with normal graft function on regular follow-up, with history of delayed graft function due to early acute antibody-mediated rejection, with complete recovery of the renal function, with native kidney disease of focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, with a history of first graft loss due to chronic antibody-mediated rejection, and second graft loss due to hyperacute rejection.
Okay. So good. So basically, patient started with an edematous illness.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So why the biopsy was done at the age of 5 years? What do you think the reason? If the patient comes to you for a proteinuric illness, what is the indication for doing a biopsy in a child?
If the patient has any active urinary sediments, if the patient is having an worsening of the GFR,
okay,
or the patient is having any family history of renal disease,
Okay.
or the patient is having an associated hypertension. And during this
Hypertension is not an indication, sorry. Hypertension will not be an indication. If the age of onset of proteinuria is within 1.5 years, then you may do it. It may be infantile nephrotic syndrome or a congenital you want to rule out, you can do it. Then
if the patient of nephrotic syndrome who has been on cyclosporin, then we do an renal biopsy.
Usually there are two thoughts. One is, first is if it is steroid responsive, you do a biopsy. Sorry, you're non-responsive, you do a biopsy, or a steroid resistant. Second, those who are becoming resistant before of the creatinine is on a borderline, you may do a biopsy just to see what is the interstitial. So you can't use a endox cyclophosphamide if there is any already in a child. If it is not responding, then the only option is cyclosporin or tacrolimus or other things. So if the person is having a borderline, already the renal function is deteriorating, before starting any calcium, you want to know the interstitium. So, or if you want to compare to the future, after an yearly, by the guideline, you need to do a biopsy. You need to know what is the baseline interstitium. So for before starting a calcineurin or a second line agent, you may have to do a biopsy.
Yes.
Okay.
And if the patient is having low complement levels, then also we might need to do.
Correct. Then it is an immunological reason, possibly. So you need to require what type. So if it is a lupus, has to be ruled out. Why in a lupus you need to do a biopsy? You can treat it. Now the protocol is simple.
So, actually, in lupus nephritis, the clinical picture and the biopsy findings usually do not correlate. Sir. The patient might be clinically nascent, but still might be having an underlying ongoing active disease in the kidney.
So the discordance between the clinical features and the histology, you mean to say?
Yes.
Okay. So the typing will tell you what is the possibility, and is there any later on, if there is any change, is there any class switching? So whether you need to treat only with steroids or you want to use an additional immunosuppressive agent, so you may have to do a biopsy in lupus. This person had a proteinuria. We don't know approximately what is the proteinuria. So is there any, based on the degree of proteinuria, is there any disease progression or the prognostication in FSGS?
Hello, sir.
The degree of proteinuria, whether it is used as a prognostication purpose in an FSGS?
Yes, sir. The patient with severe proteinuria have rapid progression to renal failure, sir. And even the patient who have severe proteinuria have high chances of recurrence post-transplantation.
What is it known as? Usually, sometimes people call it as a malignant FSGS. Malignant FSGS. So, malignant FSGS, then it is a high chance of things. Okay. Usually, what is seen, the steroid responsive secondary becoming a non-responsive, they relapse, or the steroid resistant patients, they relapse after the transplant.
Sir,
if you do a transplant,
steroid responsive patient who usually steroid resistant patients will be having an underlying genetic disorder, sir. So these patients, if they are transplanted, usually rate of recurrence is very less. Patient who
secondary non-responsive, they are the people who have more and more recurrence chances there.
Yes.
Okay. So at what point of time you want to do a genetic testing in an FSGS or any glomerular disease?
So if the patient has presents with age less than 5 years, less than 1 year with nephrotic syndrome,
or if 5 years also is okay, because if a chance goes on reducing as the age advances, but if it is less than 5 years, is a decent time you need to do it. If it is less than 1 year, definitely do it.
Definitely. And if the patient has a significant family history of renal disease and nephrotic syndrome, then he might need a renal biopsy. Steroid resistant nephrotic syndrome patients, even after treating for.
Why you want to do a renal genetic testing as steroid resistant patient?
Sir, in these patients are more prone for toxicity of other cytotoxic medications. If the genetic testing is not done. And,
right, you are right. Basically, steroid resistant. So the immunosuppression is very little role. So unnecessary immunosuppression may create an infective complications or a complication because of the drug. So you want to avoid any further intensification of immunosuppression. That is the reason you want to do a genetic testing. And that also will give an understanding if the patient undergoes a transplant, whether there is a recurrence or not. Okay. So this patient has come to you, he is steroid non-responsive. Okay. That he is not responsive. Then what is the rate of progression of to an end-stage renal disease versus he has responded to steroids?
Sir, patients who responds to steroids, again, 95% of the patients who responds to steroids will remain in remission, sir. Only thing, they might have frequent relapses or they might have infrequent relapses.
Okay.
But the 5% of the remaining patients who will be steroid-resistant patients, they progress to end-stage renal disease over an age of
5 to 10
years, sir.
Okay.
5 to 10 years.
Okay. If the patient has complete remission and a partial remission, both outcomes are different. So whether it's complete response or partial response, that also matters in the long run. If the patient is steroid non-responsive, what is the next step you want to do? What drugs you want to choose?
For steroid non-responsive patients, sir, according to the guidelines, we can try for cyclophosphamide, sir.
I'm sorry, cyclophosphamide not mentioned as steroid non-responsive, steroid responsive cyclophosphamide. Yes.
Sir, CNI, sir. We will try for CNI and we continue the CNI for at least 6.
Correct, 6 months. 6 months to see whether there is any response or no response. If there is no response, don't continue beyond 6 months because it is not possibly it won't respond.
Yes.
So still, if there is a partial response, still you can continue.
Yes.
What is partial response?
Sir, partial response is reduction in the proteinuria to less than 3.5 milligram per deciliter, but not reaching up to more than 500 milligram per deciliter.
Okay, basically 50% reduction. Most of the people say that if it is partial is more than 50%, or if it is comes to around from nephrotic to non-nephrotic, or up to 1 gram of proteinuria, but not less than a 500 milligram. So the kind of completion remission is not achieved.
Yes.
Okay. So whether there is any role or among the calcineurin, which one is better? Cyclophosphamide is better or tacrolimus is better?
Sir, most of the trials have been done with cyclosporin, sir.
Okay. But now there is a Bagga. Dr. Bagga has written a paper that tacrolimus has a good outcome even with steroid or without steroid. So both. Earlier it was a cyclosporin which was there. The problem is even in the children, there's a lot of disfigurement and hypertension. So people now have seen that the tacrolimus is also equally potent. They can use it without steroid also, especially in the children, because you said his height and weight were less, or a weight was much less as compared to the siblings. So considering the growth, I think you can use it alone.
Yes.
Okay. What is the role of rituximab in such patients?
Sir, rituximab also has been tried, sir, but
what is the possible chance of remission? So if there is steroid responsive, the response goes up to 50 to 60%. So it's a good drug to use. If there is or any steroid dependent or a responsive patient. If the steroid is non-responsive, that the response rate is only 25%. So you have to be very, very cautious because you are using a potent drug and the response is only 25%. You need to explain to the relatives before starting it.
Yes.
Okay? And the dose required is also significantly higher as compared
750.
Now, you can use 1 gram in 15 days apart, you can use it, or 1 weekly, you can also use it. Because usually most of the responsive patients, they require either 2 doses. This requires 4 doses.
Yeah.
So
750 mg per meter square.
375 millimeters. You can use weekly or double the dose every 15 days, once in 15 days. So to total of 4 vials, 500 milligrams. Yeah. So before the rituximab, what are the precautions you want to take?
Sir, we would like to test the patient for any latent tuberculosis, sir.
Absolutely right. Then
We would see if the patient is having any this hepatitis. He's having any underlying
B,
hepatitis B or
hepatitis C.
hepatitis C.
Okay. Second.
And if the patient is having any leukopenia before giving this injections.
Correct. Then
Yes.
you want to
And,
vaccinate the patient before giving it. Basically, vaccination, because it's a potent drug. So all capsulated organisms you need to vaccinate, especially pneumococcal, okay, even a meningococcal and influenza. If you do it, it is better so that the infective complications are the problem once you use rituximab. So you can prevent it.
Yes.
Okay. So this person slowly progressed and he reached an ESRD. So there are different types of FHDS. So is there any category which responds better to to treatment?
Yes, sir. The tip variant has good response to steroids, sir. It behaves like minimal change disease actually.
Okay. Okay. What is the which variant which responds very poorly and rapidly progresses?
Sir, a collapsing variant, sir.
Okay. What are the reasons for any etiological reasons for collapsing?
Sir, collapsing FSGS can be because of secondary causes like HIV, then pamidronate injection, interferon injections.
Okay.
And
parvovirus.
Yes, parvovirus infection. Yes. That's hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Sir,
is at the age of 9 years.
Sir, wait. Sir, your audio clear नहीं आ रहा है.
So what?
Hello, sir. Sir, I'm not able to hear you, sir.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Sir, the voice is breaking, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Now it is clear.
Now it's clear, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Now
audible.
Yes, sir. Now it is audible.
I'm able to hear you, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hello, sir.
Am I audible?
Sir, you able to hear me, sir? Yes, sir. You're audible, sir. Now.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now it is.
Yes, sir. You're audible now, sir. Hello, sir.
I think there is some internet issue. We'll wait for sir to join.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello, sir. I'm able to hear you.
I got disconnected. I don't know why. So he underwent a transplant. What precautions you want to take in a pediatric patient before doing a transplant as a recipient evaluation?
Sir, because this patient is in FSGS, I would like to do an genetic testing in this patient, sir, before undertaking.
Less likely, yes, of course, you can do it, but the possibility is he is 5 years at the age and he has developed a renal insufficiency by 9 years. So more than 5 to 6 years of age,
Yes.
right? So
Yes, sir.
yes, you can do it if financially feasible. Otherwise, less than 3 years, most of the time they progress or they relapse. Otherwise, less chances.
Yes.
Second,
Second, I would like to.
what is the weight of the child before the transplantation?
Sir, usually at least the patient should be more than 5 kgs before undertaking an renal transplantation, sir.
Okay, 5 kilos will be very small because why the weight of the patient's body size is important in a transplant?
Sir, because to lodge an adult kidney into the abdominal cavity, at least
Correct.
the patient should be more than 5 kgs.
Okay, so more than 5 years, so 10 kilos are better, but people have done it and it's so early. But best is to have more than 10 kilos of weight. Okay, so otherwise the problem what will happen is you'll have to keep the kidneys in abdomen. You can't fit in the retroperitoneal space. Okay,
And,
and second problem.
Sir, I would like to complete his immunization schedule prior to taking
Okay.
for
Even
renal
the
transplantation.
kidney, what will happen is kidney is big. Most of the perfusion goes to the kidney. He will have a pre-renal failure immediately after opening the clamp. And second is because you'll not be able to anastomosis to the iliac, internal iliac.
Yes.
You'll have to go higher up and you may have to anastomose.
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes people said that because it's a growing kidney, there will be disparity between the donor vessels and the recipient vessels if they have done to those things. So revision of the anastomosis may be required sometimes, so which may pose a problem because it's a growing kidney.
Yes.
And there is an increased chances of thrombosis, especially in the nephrotic state or in the children.
Yes.
Yeah. And the bladder also has to be taken into account. So this fellow
Bladder evaluation.
Bladder evaluation is a must.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Vaccination is right. You have said. So a patient has an FSGS. His mother was B positive. You said father is in diabetic and hypertensive.
Yes.
So you didn't want to consider a mother as a donor.
Sir,
AB incompatible transplant.
We can consider for AB incompatible transplantation for the boy, sir.
Okay. So if the options, all options are available, parents are the same group. You consider her group was O. She's also ready, and there is a cadaver transplant also available, or the other than related donor is also available. Which one you consider?
Sir, I would consider the patient for a cadaveric renal transplantation, sir, because the boy is still small. Usually, pediatric renal transplants throughout their life they might require 2 to 3 kidneys for transplantation.
Okay.
So we can consider an cadaver first, and then we can opt for mother as a donor later.
Why? Why? No, why not first as a mother? So the thing is, best first is always the best.
Yes.
Okay. So if the first transplant will be a longest, in this child also the same thing happened. From 10 years to 19 years it worked.
Yes.
And the second transplant he had an on-table loss. Yes. So the first is always the better, but the problem in this child is an FSGS.
Yes.
There is a study or things in registry data, they show that if there is any same, immunologically the same, the parents, then the chance of recurrence is slightly higher as compared to other than related.
Cadaveric donor should be considered more.
That might be the reason. That might be the reason you may consider, provided you have a relatively younger donor, because the younger donors are better. Otherwise, if you give a 60 years kidney to him, it will not last longer. So, because of the secondary FSGS also may land in him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, what immunosuppression you want to use in a child?
Sir, we won't use the mainly. Many have tried for steroid avoidance protocols in children.
You want
in
to
view
use
of
an induction, or you don't want to use an induction?
So we would like to use an induction in children, sir.
What induction you want to use it? The induction agent you know of.
Sir, induction agent can be depleting induction agents and non-depleting induction agents.
Okay.
In depleting agents, we have ATG and anti-lymphocyte globulin, OKT3. Then we have this OKT3 and Campath, sir. Campath, and in
right.
Alemtuzumab.
Okay.
And in non-dipling, we have Besliximab, sir.
And either previously Daclizumab also available,
Daclizumab
not
and
available, right?
Yes.
Okay. So which one you want to choose? You want to choose ATG, you want to choose IL-2, or you want to choose Alemtuzumab, which are available? All three are available now.
Sir, I would like to consider it an interleukin-2 antagonist in this child, sir.
But the donor is other than related. You don't know the HLA match. Poorly matched donor. What are the problems with a poor HLA match?
Sir, the problem with poor HLA match is that chances of late ABMR due to development of de novo DSA is more, sir. And the allograft survival also is, studies have shown that allograft survival is reduced in
increasingly poor matches, increases long-term complications, increasing DSAs. Even single HLA mismatch also can create, but less chance. It has been shown that in the previous era that it is increasingly antibodies can form if there is a more and more mismatches.
Yes.
So this fellow had an other than related aunt. So you want to use an IL-2 still, or you want, there is no problem, no infection, nothing, he is healthy. What you want to use? So I mean to say that, how do you stratify the risk of a patient for a renal transplant?
Sir, if the patient is having any history of sensitization, like a history of multiple blood transfusions, then a patient having multiple pregnancies, the patient having a retransplantation.
How many pregnancies? One pregnancy is enough?
Sir, more than two.
Right, more than
three
two
pregnancies.
Okay,
more than
right.
two. Yes.
Right.
So
then
these are considered sensitized patients and high risk. Then patients who are having HLA antibodies positivity, they come under high risk category, sir.
What is the cutoff of HLA antibodies which you want to take it as a high risk? One person has 1,000, one person has 3,000, one person has 5,000, class 1 antibodies.
Sir, based upon the highest risk is for T cell CDC cross match, sir. And second is for B cell CDC cross match. Next is for flow cytometry cross match.
Right. So if you're doing a CDC cross match, CDEC is negative, flow is positive for B cell cross match. Whether what you want to do, you want to go ahead and do a transplant, or you want to wait?
Sir, flow cross match positivity is still in high risk for renal transplantation, sir. So I would consider the patient for desensitization if at all this is the only donor available for this patient, sir.
No, the thing is his T cell is negative, his B cell is positive, your lymphocyte CDC is negative. So this means that if the B cell positivity shows that he is possibly has a underlying DSA, which is insignificant to mount a response. So these are the patients who will require to undergo a DSA testing.
Yes.
Okay. So if the facility is available, if finance is not a problem, then these are the patients who will be given a good dose of induction agent, either an ATG or alemtuzumab. What is the difference between the ATG and alemtuzumab?
Sir, ATG, sir, alemtuzumab is CD52 blocker,
correct,
sir.
Correct.
And alemtuzumab.
What is the potency-wise action on different cells? What is the difference between the two?
Yes, ATG it causes depletion of all the peripheral T cells, sir, and it also acts as an immunomodulator agent, sir. It acts on it also induces slight tolerance in the patients.
Increases
but
the
alemtuzumab
cells. Okay.
T regulatory cells, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. But alemtuzumab it depletes all the T cells, sir. So there is no extra T regulatory cell activity in alemtuzumab. And chances of late allograft dysfunction due to rejection studies have shown that it is more in alemtuzumab, sir.
Right. So the memory cells are not depleted in alemtuzumab. You are going to suppress all those things. Not only T cell, B cell also gets suppressed. So that is the reason the initial outcome may be better, but the long term, it will have a chronic antibody mediated rejection, or a memory cells are already there. They may have a relapse of the rejection, sir. Well known. but T regulatory cells are get activated, which may lead to a tolerance with the ATG. And the cytokine storm is slightly, or the cytokine response is also slightly altered with an ATG. That is the reason your long-term complication might be less. Okay, so you have doing a FSGS, you want to do a child and transplant. You want to do any, if you think that if it is instead of 5 years, the patient had 3 years only and reached an end stage renal disease, you want to consider any protocols before doing, or you want to go ahead and do a transplant?
Usually patients who have an patient progressing to ESRD within 2 to 3 years of
3
diagnosis
years
of
he
FSGS.
end-stage renal disease and initiated on dialysis.
Yes, sir. So these patients have high risk for recurrence, sir.
Okay.
Some in some studies they have tried for pre-transplant rituximab and plasmapheresis to remove the SUPAR, and then they have tried for transplantation, but the results have been equivocal in these studies, sir.
Correct. So patient underwent a transplant. So you're given an ATG induction. So you want to use your patient is on a MMF and tacrolimus and steroids on maintenance. You want to put a steroid sparing agent or a steroid avoidance protocol in this?
Sir, studies have shown that steroid avoidance protocols are better than complete steroid avoidance protocols are better than steroid sparing protocols.
Okay.
But still, compared to protocols which have steroids, avoidance protocols have lesser graft survival. Sir.
Yes, more rejections are known, as the Freedom trial has shown more rejections, but your growth and everything is much better.
Much better.
Early steroid avoidance is much better as compared to the late steroid. Right. Otherwise, the people are addicted to steroids. Once the late you may have more and more chances of rejections. So people use around 5 days to 7 days of steroid injectable and then take it off. So then the outcome is better. Their growth is definitely better. The requirement of MMF is lower. Their count is lower, and the requirement of tacrolimus also might be lower because it's also a stimulating agent. This patient underwent a transplant, and then if the patient has been following up with you, what you want to see?
So, because this patient has a native kidney disease of FSGS, I would like to monitor his proteinuria post-transplantation, sir. So I would do a daily protein measurement for first 1 week, then weekly protein measurement for next 1 month. Then
which one you want to use? You want to use urine protein microscopy or 24 hours or?
Sorry, sir. I would like to 24 hours urinary estimation, sir.
Okay, very difficult. It will be cumbersome. In the transplant, when he is there inside, we have a catheter. It is easy to do it. Otherwise, doing the 24 hours is difficult. You can do a UPCR. If the renal function is improved, you can do a urine protein creatinine ratio, which will have almost equal, or you can albumin creatinine ratio. You can do it. So that will give you a better picture and easy. Otherwise, each time he is coming weekly, 24 hours, the patient will, because he's a child, he's only 10 years. So the collection may be an inadequate. You may have an inadequate report. Okay. So if how early you anticipate a proteinuria in an FSGS?
Sir, if proteinuria in FSGS can be as early as soon as the anastomosis clamps are released, the patients can start having proteinuria, sir.
Okay. So if there is a proteinuria, if the patient has a proteinuria, after 7 days you did it, the proteinuria is 3 grams. What do you want to do?
Sir, then I would like to do 24 hours quantification of the proteinuria.
24 hours, 3.5 grams.
Only thing is that we should prior to the transplantation, we should already have a baseline proteinuria for the patient, sir.
Okay.
Why
the baseline proteinuria is important?
Sir, because the proteinuria might be from the native kidney itself.
Okay.
So if the proteinuria is more than the 3.5 gram more than the baseline proteinuria, then we think it is because of the involvement of the allograft.
Serially, you should check the proteinuria. Proteinuria should go down if it is from the native. Okay. For how many days you anticipate his native proteinuria will reduce to normalcy? Any idea?
Usually, it will
4 to
exact
6, 4
timing I
weeks.
don't know.
By 4 weeks, it should become normal. So if it is usually the renal native kidney function also serially goes down. By
Yes.
4 weeks, usually it should have proteinuria should go down.
Don't.
So serial increase in the proteinuria. If like on third day you did a UPCR, if renal function was normal, by fourth day you did S1 proteinuria, UPCR was 1, it becomes 3 by day 10. It means that even though the proteinuria earlier might be higher, but which becomes he was oliguric or anuric just prior to the transplant, serially increasing tells us that the proteinuria is from the graft.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if there is a proteinuria significant, if it is only more than 3.5 grams, what is your next plan?
Sir, then I would consider it for an renal biopsy in this patient, sir.
You've done a biopsy. It is not showing anything. Then what if normal biopsy? And there is some tubular vacuolization is seen.
Sir, even in patients whom biopsy is done and biopsy reports are not available, and he's having clinical significant nephrotic syndrome, we would consider the patient for plasmapheresis, sir.
Okay. How frequently?
Sir, plasmapheresis initially we'll do daily for 3 days, sir.
Okay.
Then followed by 3 times a week for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Then we would increase the dose of immunosuppression in this patient and also add an ACE inhibitor and angiotensin receptor blocker in the patient. Even after this, if the patient goes into remission, then we'll continue the same medication, sir. If the patient does not go into remission, then we would consider for further plasmapheresis in this patient and also consider for adding cyclophosphamide in this patient.
Okay.
Or rituximab.
Okay. So once you are given a rituximab, how many days you want to wait before doing a plasmapheresis? Okay,
sir, at least we need to wait for we need to wait for at least 24 hours after giving rituximab for next cycle of plasmapheresis.
No, we will have to wait for at least 4 days, 3 to 4 days. Otherwise, most around 60% of your rituximab may be removed by the plasmapheresis. So whenever you want to give rituximab, do a plasmapheresis, give it, and at least 3 to 4 days you wait. Okay, otherwise your effect will not be there. Yeah, so you're given a rituximab, otherwise you are wasting that important drug and blaming no response because you have done a removal by the plasmapheresis. Okay, so those patients who may require multiple plasmapheresis or multiple injections to response. If it is not responsive, then what it will do? Any other agent you want to use it? Any other agent which is available? You're given rituximab. No response, plasmapheresis, partial response. Then what you want to do?
Cyclophosphamide, sir.
You're given cyclophosphamide, no response. What are the other agents which are available?
Some people have even tried immunoadsorption, sir.
Okay. What immunoadsorption? So, how it will help you?
Sir, it helps in removal of the in any circulating exact this I don't know, sir.
Okay. Is there any lipid apheresis which helps?
Yeah,
lipid apheresis.
LDL apheresis is done, sir.
Right. In Japan, people have tried to remove. Basically, it reduces your lipid and it may become more responsive to steroids. Other people have used this abatacept. People have used with partial response. Abatacept.
Yes.
Okay. So the patient does okay. He didn't have any good. He didn't have any proteinuria. He was doing well. Okay. So it slowly progressed. Okay. So you wanted to do any biopsy. At what situation you want to do a biopsy? Slowly the patient is coming to you. The creatinine is slowly creeping. The creatinine which was 1 becomes 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. At what point of time you want to do a biopsy?
If there is any rise in the creatinine from the rise of creatinine for more than 30% from the baseline, we would like to do an or else if there is increase in the proteinuria in the patient, then we would consider him for a renal biopsy, sir.
Patient is 1 year, it's slowly progressive. So what are the reasons for slowly increasing in the creatinine? What are the reasons?
Sir, 1 year child, if first
1
I
year
would like to look for whether he is compliant with his medication, sir.
Okay. Why do you think
so
the compliance is an issue?
Sir, most common problem for chronic ABMR and in children is non-compliance to medication, sir.
Okay.
And
I agree with you. How the non-compliance affect the graft?
Sir, because of non-compliance with because of this under immunosuppression in the patients, they are more prone for development of de novo DSA in these patients, sir. So they are more prone for chronic ABMR and chronic allograft injury.
Okay, absolutely right. If you stop one dose, then how many levels get affected usually? Any idea? The child did not take a medication today. For how many how many days even the level gets affected? It's only one dose or two doses missing. How many days his level will be subtherapeutic? Any idea?
Exactly. No.
So usually if the patient stops, even it takes 5 levels or 5 T halves to become normal. Okay, so if the dose is missed today, at least 2.5 to 3 days, his level will be subnormal. That is the reason when you want to change any medication, you want to wait for 5 doses. Okay? So it is not only one day. So the multiple times he does, there will be a lot of variation. Or there are people now say as the intra-patient variability or the coefficient of variation, if it is more than 30 variation, these are the patients who become progressive. So the graft loss will be much less.
Yes.
Anyway, you can measure the compliance of this patient. Anyway, you can measure the compliance.
Compliance, we can do
patient is
trough levels of the medications can be checked, sir.
Okay. Then,
so if the trough levels,
correct, trough level can be measured. If there is any lot of variation in between the two levels, then you can think he might be missing the level 1. Second,
we can do the
so you can check the medicine
pill counts.
Medicine
can do,
count.
sir. Yes, sir.
Correct. Pill counts you can do it. That is one of the good way. So the
and
one
empty
of the
strips of tab.
Correct. These are the ways you can easily check it. Okay. So
yes.
So one is non-compliance. The other way, other reasons.
There might be drug underdosing. I mean, the sense iatrogenic drug underdosing, or there might be toxicity of the medications.
Okay, so calcineurin toxicity, you mean to say. Fine. Any other reason for slowly creeping graft? BK is one of the reasons. You need to be very careful if they don't have any rejections. So the BK is also one of the reasons where slowly graft dysfunction in the first year of life. Hello?
Yes.
So you need to.
Yes, sir, I'm able to hear you, sir.
Yeah. So the BK is also one of the reasons.
BK virus.
Right. So you have done a biopsy, mild IFTA. You want to think that there is no C4D is just plus or minus less than 25% of the area, which is not significant. So what do you think? It is because of the, how do you confirm it is because of the drug effect, or it's a calcineurin toxicity, or a chronic ABMR? How do you want to differentiate? How can you differentiate between the two?
Sir, if the for chronic allograft nephropathy, we can have the patient can have chronic allograft glomerulopathy. Then we can have peritubular capillary multilayering, or then we can have.
So where how do you see the peritubular multilayering? Where do you see?
Sir, we need to do electron microscopy, sir.
Correct. So you need to first is C4D. It may be helpful. If there is an inflammation, it will be helpful. Then you'll have to do one is electron microscopy, or you can do in situ multiple genetic testing. You can do it. So that also will be helpful. Or you can do a DSA to see is there any significant increase in the DSA in the blood. So if there is a DSA positivity or multilayering, it is possibly a chronic ABMR rather than the
chronic active ABMR.
Correct. So is there any therapy for chronic ABMR?
Sir, many treatments have been tried for chronic ABMR, sir, but exactly no therapy has been proven effective in chronic ABMR.
Okay. Okay. What therapy has been tried?
Sir,
What therapy?
they have tried with plasmapheresis, IV immunoglobulin, increase in the baseline immunosuppression has been tried, and even IVIG, yes.
Bortezomib has been tried.
Bortezomib.
Okay, fine. So his graft function was good. He reached an again IFTA possibly or a chronic antibody mediated rejection, and then he is put on dialysis again.
Yes.
Then his cross match was positive.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So then, what are the desensitization protocol you want to do to desensitize this patient to make him fit for a transplant?
Sir, for this patient, I would like to consider for whether I can try for a swap transplantation, sir, if there is any swap program available in that hospital.
Right. Correct.
Yes, sir.
Then if swap is one, second.
Yes, if there is no swap available, then I would list him in the cadaveric donor list. So look for. I'll do an PRA for him and look for
how the PRA will be helpful to you.
PRA will be helpful in him.
PRA is 60% or 70%. What it means?
Sir, it will. We will
what
be able to
determine 70% means.
So we will be able to, based upon the level of PRA, we will be able to allocate the kidney. The priority of allocation of kidney increases for the as the PRA increases. So actually, PRA 60% means that.
See, if the patient has a PRA of 7, see what it means.
Sir, it means that among the donor pool available, the patient is having cross reactivity to 60% of the donors. If it is PRA 60 means.
To 60 of the patients, so 40% of the times his cross match may be negative.
Negative.
Right. So if the PRA is high, definitely you need to do a single bead.
Single end.
Right. So you have done a single bead. Is all DSS are high, a class 1 and class 2, which is more important? Class 1 is important, class 2 is important.
Sir, in patient class 1 is more important, sir.
Okay.
Sorry,
both are important.
Class 2 is
class
more
2
important.
Is important. Class 1 is important in the early phase. Early phase, the class 1 is important. Later stages, the class 2 is important. Earlier rejections are because of the class 1. And class 2, TP, TQ. So these are also class 2, which is more important in the later stages. So to give importance to class 1, class 2 is also important. So we need to be careful. Okay. What protocols you can use to desensitize the patient?
Sir,
any idea?
Sir, there is one from Mount Sinai Hospital by Dr. Jordan and team, sir. So they have used high dose IV immunoglobulin, sir. And then there is one protocol of using plasmapheresis with low dose IV immunoglobulin.
Okay.
And they are also tried with rituximab initially, then followed by plasmapheresis and low dose immunoglobulin.
Okay. Yes. Any other? Recently from Cincinnati, the surgeon came and he gave a lecture. Any idea?
No, sir.
So any congener of bortezomib, anything available? It is used in myeloma. Carfilzomib is also used. Bortezomib is used. The problem with bortezomib is basically it's a plasma cell, acts on the plasma cell, depletes the plasma cell. So all the antibodies are produced by the plasma cell. So you do a plasmapheresis and give a proteasome inhibitors. The problem with bortezomib is basically it has to be given 0, 4, 7, 11, and the problem with peripheral neuropathy. The carfilzomib can be given as 2 doses weekly. Okay, different doses has been mentioned. You do a plasmapheresis and then give carfilzomib. They have shown within 6 weeks a significant reduction in your all the titers.
Yes.
Okay. People have used for 30 doses also without any problems. The dose which is used for desensitization is almost 8 times lower than what they use for other cancers or myeloma. So there is no problem. Basically, you do plasmapheresis weekly and give it, because the plasmapheresis, when you do it, the plasma cells become active.
Yes.
Okay? So once your plasma becomes lower or the globulins becomes lower, it tried to overcome by increasing production of globulins. So all the drugs or the chemotherapeutic agents or even the antitubercle agent for that matter, they act better in an active cells. The
Yes.
dormant cells are difficult to remove. Okay, so that is the reason you do a plasmapheresis and give the dose on the next day. So they are better.
Yes.
So they have done a reasonable, and it is available in India also. It's around 10,000 rupees is the cost. It's a reasonably good protocol. You'll be able to do it. Okay, so
Yes.
you have done, and the cross match is positive still. You want to
Yes.
go ahead, or the T cell cross match is in contraindication to transplant? What do you think?
Sir, T cell positive cross match is an absolute contraindication for renal transplantation.
If you have a T cell cross match positive or CDC, then it's
Yes.
definitely, then you will have a ABMR. So in on table hyperacute rejection, so don't do it unless, what is the situation? Your cross match is positive, still you can go ahead and do a transplant. In which situation? Is there any idea?
No.
It's a auto cross match. If there is a lupus, you have a cross match positivity.
Okay.
Then these are the patients' immune antibodies are there in the blood. So you do a positive cross match. If your positive cross match is positive and your other patient with the donor it is positive, then you need to think that you might be having auto antibodies.
Okay.
If your auto cross match is negative and it's with the donor it is positive, it's definitely a positive cross match. Sometimes it may be an IgM. So DTT, you can add it and you can see IgM. Because of that, if it is positive, then also you can disregard and you can go ahead and do a transplant.
Okay.
Okay. So if it is T, then you need to recheck again. If it is still borderline, you can do intensification by adding antihemoglobulin and do it, so that because it will be increased risk.
Yes.
Okay. So is there any idea if the first graft is failed? So you have multiple reasons. Which are the reasons of graft loss? What is the outcome in the second transplant? What are the reasons? Like patient has a BK, is a chronic, it's because of the previous graft, chronic allograft nephropathy, and acute ABMR. These are the four situations which the patient had lost the graft loss. Which one will behave very poorly and which one will behave as a better in a second transplant? If you do it.
In a second transplant, patient who had previous DSA antibody positive, they will have further chances of rejection.
The ABMR, acute ABMR, will have a poor prognosis. Then comes your chronic
BK virus patients, sir. Recent studies have recently one papers published, sir. Even patient who had lost a graft because of BK virus infection, retransplant can be considered, and their survival is better than patient.
Correct. That was what I'm saying. BK virus and non-BK virus. People have divided into two. BK virus comes to the top and the non-BK comes lower. Among the non-BK comes your disease because of the recurrence of the disease. Then comes the chronic ABMR, then the acute ABMR. Okay, and the IFTA is some just above. Okay, because of the drug. So ABMR in the previous graph, you have to think twice before, or you have to be very careful, intensity of immunosuppression, and then to do it. Okay. So if the person comes to you with any proteinuria cells thing, you want to do a preemptive transplant, or the patient, you want to put him on a dialysis and do it. Which one is better? Preemptive is better, and after the initiation of dialysis, you want to do which is better?
Sir,
patient comes to you at 7-8 creatinine. You want to do preemptive transplant, or you want to wait till him to progress and then you want to do a transplant? Both options you have.
Some studies have shown that as the dialysis vintage increases in the patient, the chances of allograft survival decreases, sir.
Why? Why do you think so?
Sir, because the studies have shown that there is also development of DSAs in patients who are on dialysis.
Why?
Exactly. Exactly, I don't know the reasons.
So the exposure of HLA antigens because endothelial dysfunction and other things, there will be more and more
Repeated blood
HLA exposure.
transfusions.
Right, repeated
Yes.
blood transfusion. So antigen sensitivity, and then they will develop it.
Yes.
Okay. So the one of the reason you said there's an IFTA or a drug toxicity, is there a way to reduce the toxicity of the drug?
Yes, sir. Drug toxicity can be reduced by addition of enzyme inhibitors, sir. Like for reduction of CNIs, we can add ketoconazole, verapamil, or diltiazem. Or else they have
Ketoconazole
also
increases
some
the level. Sorry, ketoconazole increases the level. Diltiazem increases the
the
level. Right. So how can you decrease the level?
So we can reduce the drug medications required, sir.
So
And also
medication required
people,
is an economy. See, adding a drug, increasing the level and reducing the dosage is an economically reason. It is not because of, it won't affect, or it may increase more because your acute absorption may be higher.
yes.
Yeah, so the drug variation may be there. So it is not the reason. You will have to reduce the dose overall. So what drugs you can use?
People have tried for CNI avoidance protocol and CNI reduction protocols have been tried, sir.
Which one?
But
which one do you think it is better?
Hello, sir.
Which one is better, CNI avoidance or CNI minimization? Which one is better?
Sir, CNI minimization protocol is better than CNI complete avoidance.
Why?
Sir, exactly, I'm not remembering the study name,
more number of rejections.
Yeah, more number.
Yes, if your CNI is a more potent immunosuppression, among all the drugs, the first and foremost to prevent rejection is CNI. Okay.
Yes.
So CNI is most important to prevent the complications. So if your CNI on board, then it is better. But again, the adequate dose is also important. The first year it should be around 6 to 7 or more than that, up to 8. It's okay to prevent the DSA formation.
Yes.
But there is one drug in CNI avoidance which showed a good long-term outcome. What is that drug?
Sir, sirolimus.
No. Sirolimus CNI avoidance is slightly poorer. CNI minimization is a good drug with everolimus.
Sir, belatacept, sir. Sorry.
Belatacept. Why do you think it is better? They had more rejections.
Sir,
but the long-term outcome was good.
Even though they had more rejections initially, the occurrence of de novo DSA and the graft survival was better in patients on treated with belatacept.
Okay. Okay.
And also the side effects of hyperlipidemia, then hypertension, and electrolyte imbalance was not present in patients who are treated with belatacept.
Okay. What belatacept study, earlier study was done with? Which calcineurin?
Hello, sir.
What calcineurin agent was compared with belatacept?
Trial is benefit trial, sir, and it was cyclosporin, sir.
Benefit extension, both were with
cyclosporin.
Cyclosporin. Any comparison for tacrolimus? Any idea? Tacrolimus also tried. There is a study which showed a tacrolimus alone with MMFN steroid and belatacept plus tacrolimus plus steroid, or belatacept with MMFN things. So the best outcome was belatacept plus tacrolimus had a best outcome as preservation and also the lower GFR, lower diabetes, lower malignancy.
Yes.
So it may be a minimization with belatacept also may work along with a ATG induction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is there any other drug which is coming? Because the belatacept is not available with us. Is there any other agent which is coming up? The co-stimulatory blockade, any idea? Because you want to use a co-stimulatory blockade, but in India it is not available. Is there any new drug which is coming up?
More, sir, they have tried for this JAK-STAT inhibitor like tofatinib, then
any other co-stimulatory blockade?
Abatacept they have tried, sir. Efalumab, efalizumab.
But they failed. They failed. Recently, which is coming up, Any idea? Which is shown to be good in prevention of fibrosis and increasing in the GFR.
Olcosporin? No.
No, voclosporin is again a form of a
Cyclosporin.
cyclosporin,
Yeah.
long duration of action.
No, sir. No.
Any you have heard any isquilibimab,
No, sir.
anti-CD40 with 152 ligand?
No, sir.
The phase 2 trial
Second-
is over. It showed a significant increase in the graft function compared to tacrolimus with MMF and steroid.
Sir, can you repeat the name, sir?
Isquilibimab.
Esquilibimab.
It's a Novartis product, which India they
Yes,
wanted to include, but they could not because of some financial reasons of safety.
Yes.
So I think the next year, I think they will start with the phase 3 trial. And the biopsy was done, did not show any significant fibrosis as compared to tacrolimus. So at 6 months, the biopsy showing no fibrosis, it's a very good drug and the preservation of the kidney function. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Anything else you want to know or you want me to ask? Good presentation. Keep it up.
Yes. Thank you,
Anything?
Does anyone else have any questions?
Only I wanted to ask this patient why 500 milligram BID now is 28 years of MMF. He has any leukopenia or anything?
Sir, no, sir. Actually, this patient's weight only is less, sir. His BMI is only 18, sir.
Okay. I understood. Otherwise, I thought 28 years, 29 years, and previous graft failure, ABMR, everything. So that's the reason I asked. If only 500 milligram BID. Yeah.
He's very small, sir. That's all.
Okay, Mahesh, you want to ask a question?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, as you said, the dialysis usage before the transplant is having some negative outcome because there will be more HLA stimulation and more production of HLA antibodies.
Correct.
But there is one more, in some discussion, some other school of thought is that as long as the patient is on dialysis, some form of antibodies will be removed during the course of dialysis, and there might be some.
Sorry, antibody will not be removed during dialysis. In that case, we have all the antibodies are all antiglobulins. So in that case, you don't do a dialysis, you don't do a plasmapheresis, you do a dialysis. Antibodies are not removed during dialysis.
Okay. So then, okay, sir. Then peritoneal dialysis may have better outcomes when compared to HCG because of the same reason.
Anything is an inflammatory state. ESRD is an inflammatory state, right?
Yes, sir.
So the duration of inflammation, when it is longer, there will be endothelial dysfunction.
Yes, sir. Yes.
More antibodies are known if you get it.
Okay.
So anything which and the multiple transfusions which is going to happen, it is going to increase the chance. So preemptive transplant is always best for the patient.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. So
Abhishek, sorry, sir.
If there is a more dialysis, then you have to be more careful. More evaluation is required. Second is if there is more dialysis, his bladder also will be dysfunctional. Unity evaluation of the bladder is more important because immediately after transplant you will have a small bladder. So you have bladder evaluation is also a must.
Okay.
Yeah.
Abhishek, yeah.
Sir, hello, good sir. I want to ask that you asked a question that in a pediatric transplant we would like to taper off the steroids as soon as possible.
Correct.
Because that might interfere with the growth of the patient.
Correct.
But such patient, if he goes for a second transplant like this patient, will we still try a rapid steroid withdrawal, or in second transplant we will
It all depends on how early he had a graft loss. If the patient has lost his graft after 10 to 15 years because of the chronic process, still you can try a steroid avoidance.
Okay.
If the patient has had an ABMR or an acute antibody-mediated rejection in the early course, then I'll be hesitant to use a steroid avoidance protocol.
Okay.
Okay, in a blacks, or an African American, there a protocol of steroid
Higher
avoidance
rejection.
has a high rejections.
Yes. Yes.
Sandeep?
Sir, good evening.
Good evening.
Sir, in children, it has been told that if we start with dialysis initially, we can assure the compliance of the patient for the future transplantation. So, sir, is it like that for children? Initial few months of dialysis and then transplant will be better,
Any patient, the best is to have transplant. Preemptive transplant is much better outcome as compared to dialysis. But the only thing is, those who are not tasted the dialysis, they don't know the pain of dialysis, they may have a compliance issue. So you have to make sure in such patients, the compliance is not a problem, not the dialysis. Those patients who are not, like people used to say in one time, the patient who are undergoing an LSES, their affection towards the children is much lower as compared to those who underwent a normal labor, because they have faced the pain. So that is the reason they have. I'm not against anywhere, but this is the just previously used to. So in the similarly, they know the pain of dialysis, they know the importance of the kidney, so they will take the medication properly. But in the children, on the adolescent age group, they are more prone to get problems because of the discontinuance because of the steroids or the calcineurin, and more they have a non-compliance issue or a non-adherence issue.
Okay.
Basically,
Sir,
people used to say put on dialysis. Basically, they know the pain of it so that they have a more adherence to the treatment, not otherwise.
Dr. Rashmi, you also had a question?
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Yeah,
Sir, I
good
wanted.
evening.
We always say that within 4 weeks the proteinuria from native kidney will reduce, but
Yes.
why is that? And another question they ask is, how will you measure if it is from native or from this new kidney? We say labeled albumin test we have to do. Is it correct, sir?
Basically, which comes from the kidney, the proteinuria, you can do albumin tag those things, but basically as the kidney, the graft function improves, the native kidney perfusion also goes down. That is the reason your function goes down. Like you do a intensive dialysis, this urine output goes on reducing when you start initiation of the dialysis.
Yes, sir.
And similarly, his kidney function, the new graft is much better. Otherwise, because of the edema and other things, the kidney used to produce some amount of urine. So the native kidney urine output slowly goes on reducing. So once your edema or the urine output reduces, the proteinuria also reduces.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Yes.
So usually you can take it, people have used as an 80% of the times are 4 weeks or maximum 6 weeks. But if your kidney proteinuria goes on increasing every weekly or every by around 3rd day or 4th day, then it has to be from the graft. It can't be from the native kidney. Unless your kidney is not functioning, graft is not functioning properly, graft is function, and whatever is coming from the native, then it won't improve.
Okay, sir. Okay. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Are there any more questions? If no, then we'll end this session. Thank you so much, sir, for joining.
Okay. Hope it is
Thank you so
useful.
much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes,
All
sir.
the best.
Very
All the
Thank you,
best.
sir.
thank you,
Yes,
sir.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Vijay, from where are you?
Sir, I am from Karnataka, sir.
Where? Karnataka, where? Patil.
Hubli, sir. Hubli.
Hubli, na?
Okay.
Ah, sir.
Hubli proper,
Thank
huh?
you, sir. Ah, sir. Hubli proper, sir.
Okay. All the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We'll end the meeting. Anything else we'll discuss in the chat. Thanks.
Okay. Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Thank
All the
Thanks.
best.
Thanks.
Thank you.